Hey, welcome back to Women in Sales Leadership. I am your host, Amy Evans. I'm a sales leadership coach. I also coach founders who are ready to take their business to the next level with sales strategy. And I help all of those folks make progress. For my sales leaders, I help them land new roles, get promoted, get clear, navigate challenging parts of their career. For my founders, it's pretty much the same thing, only we apply it to the business. If you're here now, this show was built for you. And if you're in sales leadership or you want to be, and you are done with playing smaller than you know you want to be playing, we talk about real career strategy, real leadership, and real life. No BS here. Before we get into today's episode, there are a couple things. If something in this show today lands for you, I'm going to extend you the invitation. Give a little gift to a friend, forward it, text it to them. They'll be so grateful that you thought of them and you gave them something that you thought was useful and valuable. So you probably have somebody in your circle of friends who wants or needs to hear something like this today. Give that away to them. I'm also making a gift available to you. If you want to talk to me, I'm here for you. I've had listeners from this podcast reach out to me. We've had great conversations together. The way to get time on my calendar, I will gift a career planning session to you if you just come swing by my website, which is amyevanscoaching.com/work with me. It's in the show notes. Also, if you just go to amyevanscoaching.com, you will find it, I promise. Today's episode is so personal. And honestly, I don't know, every episode I feel like is important, but this one is really personal because I'm going to take you behind the curtain on my own entrepreneurial journey and how this business was born and what actually happened along the way and what had to change in me. What had to change in me to make it real? Because the biggest thing is, this is the biggest professional leap that I've ever made. It's crazy. I've had all these big jobs. I've run hundreds of millions of dollars of businesses for companies. But this is the one that's so big, and you'll understand why. Many of you are standing at the edge of your own biggest leap, the biggest jump forward. And here's what I want to give you out of today's episode. This is what you're going to get. So number one, you are going to understand what it feels like to be called to do something before you're actually ready, and why not being ready might mean it's actually the perfect right time for you to get going. Second, I want to walk you through how this business was built. And let me tell you what, I'm going to spoiler alert, it wasn't a straight line. Not even close. And if you're in a season where everything feels so messy and unrefined and you feel like you're behind, I want you to hear this. And then third, I'm going to talk to you about the most important part of this whole journey that I had no idea was going to be so critical, but has ended up forming so much of what I do every day, what I work with my clients, whether you're a CEO or a founder or a sales leader. We work on the same thing, and it's my own thing that I work on, and everybody is working on this. It's identity. It's that wall that every single person hits when they're about to make a big jump up. Yeah. And I've hit it every single time, but never like this. Never like this. So I am going to talk about it with you today. So stay with me to the end, because what I share in the last section about this identity stuff is something that I wish I had learned a decade ago. It would have made such a huge difference for me. And this one piece alone could really help you have a breakthrough in how you're thinking about what you're doing and what you're envisioning and all the stuff and the good work that you're up to. So let's go. All right. Let's see, talk about, we'll go back in the past a little bit. So back in the past, which wasn't that long ago, a few years ago, I spent all this time running these really big sales teams. I spent 25 years leading sales teams. Half of the time it was at big Fortune 500 companies, and then half the time it was at startups. And these startups were what I would call mid-stage startups. They were like Series B, C startups. They became C while I was there. Some of them even went to raise more money while I was there. And while I was doing all this stuff, I would get to the end of every quarter, or I would definitely get to Q4, and I'd start to look at the beginning of the year, and I'd have this thing in the back of my mind. I was like, am I going to sign up to do this again? Am I going to sign up to run this race again? Because I really feel like I could run my own business. And every time I would have that idea, like, I really feel like I could run my own business, then there would be this, side voice that would say, yeah, but what would it be? You don't really know. Right. And so I would let that like not knowing of what the business would be shut me down and like put me back into, okay, I'm going to just keep doing what I'm doing, because while I know I could do it, I believe I could do it, I don't know what the hell it would be. No clue, right? And so the idea wasn't there, but this like calling started a decade ago, if not longer. I mean, I wanted to be CEO when I was 23 years old, and I was dialing for dollars and generating leads for a startup, right? Like I always was a little full of myself. As I got a little older, that tempered, but my self-belief and confidence has never waned. It's not always super high every single day, but in the round, I'm a genuinely confident person, and I think that comes from just a little bit of faith in me. I'm willing to bet on me. So, but back to this business thing, I didn't know what the hell I would do. I didn't know what it would be like, and the idea wasn't there. So this question kind of comes to like, what does it mean to start to feel called to do something? What does that mean, Amy? Like you were called to, right? You might hear people say things like this, and maybe some of you hear it and you're like, I know exactly what you're talking about. I hear you. To give a little bit more context, it's this knowing where something in you knows that you want this thing and you really believe you're ready for it. Like the confident, like 8-year-old or 5-year-old or however old that little girl is, who was just like, put me in charge. Let me do it. Me do it. Right. That girl. No, you can't hold that girl back. You better watch out for that girl. She will run over you. Right. That girl knows. That little girl inside us knows. And so that's what I mean by calling, is this like instinct, this gut, this feeling, if you will. If some of you are kinetic learners like I am, which I just learned about myself. I always thought kinetic learning meant that I wanted to work my hands. I'm like, no, actually kinetic learning means that you are a feeler, like you're a gut person. And I've always been a gut person. So here we go. Might explain why my pants are tight. Anyhow, that was inappropriate, but you got it anyway. So there's this tension that I experience that I think is so present when I talk to all the founders that I talk to regularly. And I've had so many of them on this podcast. And there's this tension between like, you want it and you feel like you can do it, but you're scared, which is normal, and you don't actually feel ready. And this waiting to be ready part, what I am here to tell you, is true from starting this business to all of every single journey, every single step that I've made in my career along the way. I never felt ready. Ever, ever, ever. So if you are waiting to feel ready, I am here to tell you it's not gonna happen. And what will happen is suddenly you get to a point where you currently are and what's going on in your life, in your world, becomes intolerable to you. because you see this possibility of this thing that you know could happen, that you know could be real for you. And you don't feel ready to do it, but there's only one way to go get that thing. There's only one way. Yeah. And that's to freaking go for it. Yeah. You are likely, the people listen, you are a high performer. You are. I know you are. You wouldn't be in this conversation if you weren't. And there is something that has been calling you, could be career-wise, could be professionally, could be in like a leisure or fun place in your life. We're allowed to have fun, remember? We are. We're not necessarily great at it. For those of us who are workers, high performers, like we just work. And who are hobbies for other people? You could feel a calling. And I know you have something that's like that for you right now, because you wouldn't be alive if you didn't, right? And I know you're alive because you're here. So when I look back, to go back to like what actually happened, when I reflect to like, how did I get here? How did I get to where I am speaking to you right now? How did I get to where I am no longer working in corporate America? How did I get to this moment in time? And I'm not only working in corporate America, but I'm not living in a box under a bridge. I am not bankrupt. And I really like my life every single day. I didn't know that would be possible, because when I rewind how I got here, it all started with something that happened. And that's always how every story happens. Like something happens and then the rest happens. The thing that happened for me was I was working at Salesforce. I'd gotten this big job. I was making huge money, like really big money, more money than I'd ever made before. Maybe that's why they decided they couldn't afford me anymore. I don't know. But I was making great money working for one of the best companies in the world, great people, great, nothing's perfect anywhere, but I loved it overall. I really did. There was Salesforce had to do a layoff. Anybody who can rewind the time capsule and look back at what was going on in Salesforce back in late 2022, 2023, there were activist investors inside the business who were pressuring the board and the CEO to create a bigger profit margin. So how were they going to do that? They decided to do a big layoff. So I was one of 10,000 people on the first day of the fiscal year who got a little email that said, whatever those emails say, they all say the same damn thing. You basically don't have a job anymore. And by the way, all your access to your systems are cut off. Literally, we closed the fiscal year. Everybody worked until like midnight the night before closing deals. And the very next day, these thank you, but no thank you emails went out. Like, we don't need you anymore. And when I got that email, what's funny, and I think this says so much about my mindset and where I was in my life, was I'd taken that day off, which wasn't unusual, but it might have been one of the first times in 3 years I'd taken the first day of the fiscal year off, because we had worked until way late and weekends and all that intensity that happens at the end of the quarter. You all know this. So I was like, oh, I'm allowed to take the day off. Well, what so happens was that my son happened to have this volunteer activity that they wanted parents to volunteer for. Guess who never volunteered for anything for any of her kids? Me. Why? I was always busy working. I was traveling. The deals were closed. I had all the reasons. I wasn't there. And some of you may listen to that and be like, oh, you're a terrible mother. Some of you may listen to that and say, yeah, me too. I made choices. I would make different choices now. But back then I made choices that I thought that made sense to me. Anyway, I was volunteering at for my son's school, and I didn't even know I'd received the email. I had no idea. I didn't even look at my phone. I didn't open up my emails because I was being present, volunteering for my son's thing. And I wanted my son to see me not sitting there. I wanted to be an example, a role model for him, right? Of like, he was important enough for me to be fully present for. He was important enough for me to put my phone away and then not be worried about whatever shenanigans or ridiculousness was happening on the first day of the fiscal year. And the only way that I knew was that I started to get like texts and phone calls from my team that reported to me. And I'm sitting there at this event, and there did happen to be like a small break where, the kids were off doing something. And I thought, well, let me just check to make sure there's not some actual emergency, like legit something bad has happened to somebody and I need to be supportive in some way, shape, or form. I couldn't resist. I did look at it. And I spoke to, I saw the email, or I didn't even see the email. I spoke to my colleague and he said, "I'm so sorry." And I said, "Oh." And he said, "You haven't seen the email yet." Yeah. So then I read the email and I was laid off. And it was the first time in 14 years, or excuse me, not 14 years, first time since I was 14 years old that I didn't have a job. Since I was 14 years old. So I'm, volunteering, layoff. I'm sitting there and I'm like, whoa. I go to lunch. Oh my gosh, I'm starting to remember what actually happened this day as I'm telling this story right now. Oh, there were parts I blocked out. Okay. So I'm sitting there at lunch. I'm still at the volunteer thing for my son's school, and there are other parents there. And I see this beautiful woman. She's striking beautiful. And she's, looks so pretty, and she's dressed, just so, and she has this air about her that's just so much energy, so much charisma, if you will, but at the same time, just at ease, right? She's not putting on airs. She's not performing for anybody. This is just who she is. She's just a badass. So we sit across each other for lunch, and our sons get to talking, and they're in their own conversation. And this other mom looks at me and she says, "So how are you?" And I said, "Well," and I told this perfect stranger that I met 2 seconds before that I'd just been laid off from my job. I'm not going to make this episode about her, but she actually plays a role in me launching my business later. So I tell her my story, and her eyes light up. And she starts to share like, "Oh my gosh, there are like 4,000 things that you could do with that experience and all of that amazingness that you have from this career." Cause I gave her like a slight rundown, but I'm still like shock. I don't know what just happened to me. Like I'm trying to like keep myself together, not cry, decide how I'm feeling, processing all of the normal human things that happen when you learn that suddenly you don't have a job anymore. Boy, I forgot about that conversation. So she gives me all of this. And actually, in that moment, it felt like this just little boost that I needed of confidence from a perfect stranger, which is amazing what someone who you don't even know, when you start to share with them what's really happening in your world, how they show up in a way that's like they want to help you out and support you and be helpful to you. Little side nugget there of, if you're not sharing what's going on in your world, that you have an opportunity to do that and go get support from somebody who just sees how amazing you are and wants to help you. So there's that. Okay, side trip. I took a side trip there, but this is all part of it. Some of you have shared this before. I'm going to share it again, which is, that day that I got laid off, I was like 4 months into a divorce and separation process from my husband that I'd been married to for 17 years. And to say that it was a struggle is the most understated thing. And if you've not gone through divorce, bless your heart. I hope it never happens to you. If you have, then you know what I'm talking about. And anyway, all of a sudden I'm just like, wow, who am I? Who am I? Who am I? if I'm no longer a VP of sales at a big Fortune 500 company, if I don't have a title, if I don't have this compensate, like how much money I make, part of my identity, what my title is, part of my identity, what company I work at, part of my identity. I was a wife, part of my identity. I'm a mom still, always and forever. Forever, I hope, and always and forever, amen. Right. But those are my identity. So I'm like, already this big component of my identity of being a wife and like being someone who was married was going away. And then I had this identity of a VP of sales going away. And it was like being stripped down to the core, baby. Because it was. And in retrospect, all of that really had to happen for me. And I look back at it now. It didn't feel that way at the time. Actually, at the time, what I felt was a lot of grief and, shock in the first couple of weeks. And then later, I felt some peace. And then I'll tell you some more about that in a minute. What's so fascinating when I think about this, a few years later now, that was all happening in 2023. So this is 3 years ago. It were these two really major life changes happening at once. And I don't think those things were a coincidence for me. Yeah. I'm a believer. I'm very spiritual. I was raised Episcopalian, but we were like Sunday Episcopalians. We were like Christmas and Easter Episcopalians. And in my adult years and really recently over the past 4 or 5 years, I've come to be extremely aligned with my faith and spirituality. And what I know for myself is just for me, and there's no right or wrong. I don't believe that there's whatever you believe is great. I would never judge it. Take myself a big pride on, I work hard not to judge people as much as I humanly can, because we are all just out here doing the best we can with what we got. But spiritually, I am oriented toward this. I believe in this oneness. I believe in this energy. I believe in what some people call God. I'm more comfortable calling it the universe, which if you experience God or relate to that word, the universe is my word for that. So I'm going to use that word just to give you an orientation, like the universe. Universe uniting all living things, all of that. And what I began to feel now that I can look back with some perspective on that time, was that I felt like the universe created that chaos for me because I needed to let go of all of that stuff in order to get access to this dream that I'd had since I was 23 years old. Yeah. And this was happening 25 years later, right? It only took 25 years to get there, right? Sometimes these things happen. The negative stuff happens and it feels horrible at the time. It feels terrible, awful. And I'm talking tragedy. I'm talking major suffering. But it removes having these things happen to you can become a happening for you. Now, I'm not going to, if you're dealing with a major chronic health issue or someone you know is like, I would never try to tell you or bullshit you into telling you that that's happening for you. That's just what's so. It's happening. This is something else. I felt like this happened for me. And if you are in a position where you're dealing with some kind of something's been forced upon you, number one, just let yourself be okay with the fact that it sucks or it's hard or it's a struggle. because no amount of you positive talking yourself or trying to pull yourself by your bootstraps up is going to change that until you allow yourself to feel the pain and process that pain and let that move through you. And that can take time. And if you choose to let it be there and move through you, then you can start to heal and begin to create space for what you really want. And some of you are dealing with heavy stuff, like you've been laid off or your spouse has been laid off, or you're worried about that happening. Or some of you are dealing with relationship stuff, like your relationship is ending, or, you're dealing with things with your parents or your kids, right? Sometimes these big forced transitions, you're like right in the middle of the hardest part, and there will be light that's going to come to you, and it will happen. I'm a big believer in that. So what did I do? I'll fast forward a bit. I get laid off. I'm going through this divorce. I crawl into bed and cry. I get out of bed and, 2 weeks later, and I began to think, maybe this is my chance to do something else. And I was weighing all the stuff that's so normal. It's like, oh, I got to get out there and get another job right away. I started interviewing for roles. I interviewed for, I'm going to say, I had to put this data together as part of my divorce proceeding. So I know this data. I think I did 23 different interviews, and I didn't get any of them. But also I didn't want any of them. And when the person who's interviewing you and the company that's interviewing you can feel that coming off of you, that you're like, I don't really want this job. I don't really want to go back to where I was before, doing the same thing I was doing before. You don't get the job. They can tell. They can tell you're not that into it, right? And so I started to come to grips with the fact that maybe, just maybe, I could build a business. I wasn't ready to really acknowledge that yet either. Like, the denial and resistance went on for a few months. I had a runway. I was lucky. I had a nice little severance package. Actually, it was not little. I had a nice severance package from Salesforce. I'll full on acknowledge that. Like, I had time. But, I don't know about any of you, but that's like the meter's running, the clock is on. You're like, oh shit, I have to figure this out. So in the meantime, the divorce, is happening and all that. And I'm trying to keep my own sanity during that point in time. I'm trying to create an environment where, I'm not making myself crazy. I'm not making my kids crazy. I'm trying to diminish as much craziness as possible between myself and my soon-to-be ex-husband during that time. Sometimes I was successful, sometimes I did not succeed. And a few months in, I get this idea, because I'd had this idea like a decade ago. It's like, I think it'd be fun to have a podcast. A decade ago, this was a thought that I had, and it kept coming. It would occur to me. I'd be driving my car. I'd be listening to somebody else's podcast and be like, oh, I think I'd like to have a podcast someday. And then I would be like, well, what would it be about? And who would I started with the, how would I get it done? And thinking I had to have this perfect plan in order to have my podcast. There's never a perfect plan. Ever, ever, ever. There's just something that inspires you, something that lights you up. You're like, I think I'd like to do this. Let me go explore it, right? So I did start the podcast, and the way I got it done a decade after I'd had this random thought that kept occurring to me over and over again was I had my good friend, Allison Hare, who's now a good friend, reach out to me and say, hey, I coach people on how to start a podcast. Are you interested in that? And I said, yes. And I hired her to become my podcast coach. She helped me take this I don't really know what I'm going to do, but I know I want to do something vision. She helped me put it together in a way that this conversation was born. So thank you, Allison, for this opportunity. And for those of you who have been listening from the beginning, I want to say thank you. And I also want to say, like, you are a brave soul to have been with me through those very first episodes where I felt like a total freaking idiot when I was recording those things, because that's how I felt. And I hope it didn't feel that way to you, but it's definitely what it felt like. And the fact that you might still be here is just like, my heart is so huge knowing that you might have stayed for that. I started this podcast. I had no idea what I would do with it. I was just like, oh, I want to do this podcast. There's no podcast for women in sales leadership. This is what I want to do. I care deeply. I'm inspired. I want more women in sales leadership. Like, it's bam, magical, amazing, right? And I got out there and I just started recording these episodes. I felt like a dummy while I was doing some of them. I remember like being so freaking nervous when I hit record. I remember even feeling more nervous when I hit publish. And I think it was my mom and my brother were the ones that were listening. Right. And now this podcast has grown into one of the top 10 podcasts globally, which I'm so like humbled to even say. So I started this thing and I didn't know what I would do with it. Meanwhile, now that I've got like the chains of corporate and like that, I don't care what corporate thinks about me anymore. And I don't care what Salesforce or anybody or my boss or anybody thinks about me anymore. I just started posting on LinkedIn. I just start posting what I've wanted to talk about, which is largely was leadership, encouragement. I tried to be inspiring, just what was on my mind, baby. I kept posting about things like that. And what was fascinating, and I posted kind of randomly, like I didn't have some sort of big, huge schedule that people stick to, like no formula. I didn't take a LinkedIn posting course. There are people out there that will teach you how to post on LinkedIn to progress your own personal brand. But I was just making stuff up. I'm just like, this is me. I'm doing it. Here you go. Here you go, world. You're welcome. Here are thoughts from Amy. And what's fascinating about that was I was getting some nice feedback from my former colleagues. I was getting commentary from people. And then I happened to get hired to do my first, accidentally, I get hired to do my first fractional VP of sales job. It was actually a CRO job for a startup. And so I did that for about 4 months with this company. And then I had this other company reach out and say, hey, we'd like you to come be our CEO for a little while for this business. That was a real learning lesson, by the way. I won't cover that in this episode, but boy, that was a big learning lesson to do that job as a fractional CEO. And guess what? I was so excited about that. I get to be a CEO. Are you kidding me? Like, they're going to have me be the CEO. That's what I always wanted, babe. Dream come true. 23 years old. I said I want to be a CEO. Here I am. Well, that gig lasted 2 months. Anyway, more on that story, what happened there later. But these were like beginning things starting to happen. None of this is perfect, by the way. Do you hear perfection in this story? Do you hear some sort of like straight line from A to B with no bumps in the road? These were the bumps in the road. These were the learnings. These were my like, oh, that worked. Oh, that didn't work. Right. Experiments being run in real time about how I wanted to do my business and who I wanted to work for and what kind of people I wanted to work for and what I wanted to do. Meanwhile, I have sales leaders that start reaching out to me and sellers that start reaching out to me in my network who want help, and they want help on career coaching. They want help. The people that reached out to me, they're going through these big transitions. They were either like switching companies, or they were getting ready to get promoted, or they wanted a promotion and they wanted help. They wanted help from somebody who'd done it before, and they wanted somebody who understood the world that they were in, who'd sold in professional services and led in professional services, who'd sold and led in business to business tech. Well, that's me, right? So they called me, and I'm like, "Whoa, this is awesome!" They wanted me to coach them, and I loved it. I loved doing that. I loved helping these phenomenal sellers and leaders find their way and get clarity about what they wanted, what they needed, and what actions they were going to take, and then how they were going to take those actions and how to best package themselves and position themselves so that they could get what they were looking for in that transition, right? And so that's what we worked on together. And it just really happened somewhat organically. And so here I am. I'm building right now today in two directions at once. I've got coaching that I do with sales leaders. It's primarily sales leaders that come to me. And I help them navigate these big moments where, let's face it, nobody knows what it's like to be a sales leader or a seller unless you've done it before. And your spouse or your relationship person or your family, like they love you. They just don't get it. And it's okay. It's not their fault. It's not their fault. They just don't understand. And um, so I coach sales leaders in that way. I also work with founders who are in their business and they've grown their business to a certain point and they're now ready to take their business up a big level. And they have this vision of like 5xing their business, like growing 5 times as much over a short period of time. So I help them get all the things that they really have to have in place in order to make that work. Because one of the biggest mistakes that I've seen in the past year and a half of working with founders and CEOs is oftentimes they'll rush to go hire a sales leader or they'll rush to go hire a salesperson. And the sales leader isn't going to sell anything. They're expecting the sales leader to sell stuff. They're expecting the salesperson to just show up and execute and sell things. Meanwhile, nobody has set the table. I like this metaphor because it works for me because I think about food a lot and I like to cook. I think about it from the perspective of founders. They want the revenue. We all like, right? We gotta sell. We gotta have the sales. Founders want the revenue. They want it to come out consistently. They want it to be amazing. They want it to be excellent every single time. Excellent meaning like it's accurate, it's on time, it's everything it's supposed to be to run the business and keep the business humming, right? So they want this meal cooked for them every month, every quarter. And if you don't do the work properly and you go hire a sales team, you're asking them to show up in your kitchen to make this excellent meal, but you don't have any pots and pans. You don't have any knives. You've got no stove or oven, not even a grill, right? I help build the kitchen for the revenue to be made in so that you can hire the sales team and they'll come in and be able to execute. So that's what I'm doing on the founder side. So I get to satisfy this coaching component that I love, and then also this very strategic, put the pieces together, connect the dots for founders who I'm now one of them, and I can appreciate all of their pain, their hard work, and how much they want and need their businesses to succeed. And so this is where I am right now today. And what I'll offer you is that I tied that all up in this like nice little neat bow along the way. There were so many ups, downs, sideways, trying things, realizing that didn't work, trying something else, right? We have a phrase for that, and I'm going to use it. It's the messy middle. It's the messy middle. And if you're in the middle of messy middle right now, like, you're not going to get out of it. The only way in the messy middle is like through the messy middle and acknowledging it when you're in it. You're like, okay, this is the messy middle. It's not going to last forever. I will get through it. I can't tell you when exactly I'm going to get through it because I'm in the middle and I can't see when the middle ends, right? But taking some comfort that if you're right there where it feels super uncomfortable and you're trying stuff and it's not working and you're trying some things and they kind of are working and nothing's working fast enough, then you're in the right spot because you're trying something and you're in action and you're figuring it out. You're not failing. You're figuring it out. Yeah. I'll get to the last part here. And when I look at everything I've done from the minute that I decided that I was going to leave little old Casper, Wyoming and the University of Wyoming and move to Atlanta, where I knew one person and my whole family was back in Wyoming, right? And I did that and I got my MBA and I got my first sales job. And then I got my first leadership job and I worked for my first startup. And then I worked for my first Fortune 500. And then I worked for all those things along the way. Every single time I made a big jump up, the thing that changed, and this is the one that I wish someone had told me, because when you're in the middle of it, it's hard to see. But if you can do it and be aware of it, the embracing happens a little bit faster when you can see that every big step like that requires a shift in your identity. What do I mean by identity? Okay. So identity is, who are you? Who do you have to be? You want to be an enterprise salesperson who's making $500,000 a year, then your identity has to shift to be, I'm an enterprise salesperson and I earn $500,000 or $1 million a year. If you're a sales leader and you want to make that kind of bank, same shift has to happen where you're like, this is who I am now. This is how I'm going to, and it changes your identity governs, this is the data on identity, like how you see yourself governs 98% of your behavior. I used to try to just work out because I knew I had to. And what changed for me 2 years ago was I changed my identity to, I'm a healthy, disciplined person. And when I changed that identity of like, I'm a healthy, disciplined person, I'm not perfect. Never would claim to be. But like my attitude toward working out, I'm like, this is just who I am. It's not something I have to do. This is who I am. This is who I am. This is the standard I'm holding myself to because I'm a healthy, disciplined person. When you become the CEO, the founder, you are the founder. You are the CEO of your business. And this is who you are now. And this is how you get to align yourself. And I would offer that you're the CEO of your life. All of you are, regardless of whether you're a founder right now or a leader in any shape or form, like you are in charge. And when you get to embrace that as your identity, all of the actions that you need to do, like the how, is going to follow. How do I become a healthy, disciplined person? Well, I work out 3 days a week, minimum, every other day. Every other day I work out. The days I don't work out, I still go for a walk or I do stretching or yoga or Pilates. That's identity. And it requires a little bit of letting go And these identity shifts don't have to be as drastic as the one that I just walked you through, where it took me getting divorced, getting laid off, and me being stripped down to bare wood so that I could decide, who am I going to be now? What do I want my life to be about now? What am I going to do with the life that I have left? What am I going to build? What am I going to create? And anytime that I have encountered for myself like resistance of doing this whole thing, it's it shows up, the resistance wants you to stay the same. Like there's this crazy push pull in the human brain, which is like a lot of 7 human needs. If you ever want to look them up, like Tony Robbins made them popular. They've been around in popular psychology for a long time and are documented. But one of the human needs is comfort, and the other human need is growth. 2 needs that push and pull. One side of me wants to be sitting on the couch watching The Pit and all my Netflix shows and binging out. Other side of me is like, what are you doing? You could be learning something right now. And I bet if you spent 30 minutes learning something right now, you'll sleep better, right? So there's this push-pull. A lot of this is in how I see myself and how you see yourself. And that how you see yourself and how you perceive your identity and when you're ready to embrace a new version, a new, perspective on you, it really comes down to how are you talking to yourself? Because that old cliche of thoughts become things is real. And if 95% of the time the talking to yourself is, this is hard, but I can do it. This is hard. I've done hard things before. This is hard, but I'm disciplined. This is hard, and I know I'm going to get there. Because you will. You will. This is where the work happens. It happens alongside of all the other things that you're doing. So if you are still working through, if you're still working through how to get a hold of that, it's okay. It just means you're in the messy middle. And what I would say, if you are bumping up against knowing that you're ready to embrace this growth identity of yourself, just start to do one thing or a couple of things toward the direction of what you want. Action is the solution every time to anxiety. It's the answer to worrying. It's the answer to overwhelm. Just get started. Just do one thing. One thing. Okay. Oh, we better wrap this up. If you have made this to the end of this episode, I want to say thank you so much, genuinely. It takes a lot to show up and tell the truth, which I don't have a trouble telling the truth ever. But I think what can be hard, and if I think back to where even my identity was a few years ago, I would have been too afraid to admit the setbacks and the things that didn't go right, because I wanted to always present this version of myself that like came off as I've got all my stuff together, I've got all my shit together, and everything is just works for me because I'm an executive and I have it all together and it's all good, right? Well, nobody is like that. No human being is like that. Doesn't happen that way. Even the most successful business leaders in the world will talk about the reality of the setbacks that they have on a daily, regular basis, and how they started off to try to do something one way, didn't quite work out. And what I would invite you to let go of is judgment of any of those setbacks as failure. It's not failure. It's not. You tried something. it didn't work out the way you thought it would, what would you say to your best friend if they came to you and said, I'm a failure, I did this and it didn't work out and I'm a failure? What would you tell them? That's what you want to tell yourself, what you just said in your mind, right? Here's what I want to leave you with. The leap that you're afraid of, that you are afraid to take, the fact that you are even talking about it, you're thinking about it, you might have already set this leap in motion just because you are starting to get closer and closer to acknowledging that you want something for yourself and you're ready for whatever that is. And the clarity nearly always comes before you're ready. No one's ready. You talk to any major entrepreneur company, leaders who have created $1 million a year businesses, 5 million and above. They weren't ready. They just believed and decided, even though they were scared, they believed enough that they were going to figure it out. Okay. If any part of today's conversation brought something forward for you, like stirred something in you, a thought, a question, a what if, or that thing that you've been thinking about, but not doing anything about, right? That you want for yourself in your life, that is your signal. And again, if you enjoyed today's episode and you got value out of it, please be generous, forward it to a friend, to somebody that you like and respect, and throw it in a text, probably the easiest way to get it to somebody. And if this show was powerful for you and you want to give me feedback about it, like come find me on LinkedIn. I'm at Aylin Evans at LinkedIn. And if you want to take me up on my offer to spend an hour talking about a career planning session with you, then come find me at amyevanscoaching.com/work with me. And until then, go be the leader that you know you are, and you are more powerful than you think you are. You got this.